Most people are living a life that doesn't belong to them. They wake up in houses they didn't choose, go to jobs they don't love, speak words they don't believe, and wear smiles that hide a deep, gnawing emptiness. They follow rules passed down by family, culture, religion, and school, believing that compliance will one day lead to fulfillment. But it doesn't. Instead, they feel numb, quietly panicked, haunted by a question they can't articulate, only feel. Carl Jung didn't offer comfort for this kind of crisis. He offered fire. He called out the machinery of conformity, the emptiness of surface-level identity, and the quiet tragedy of a person who lives their whole life without ever meeting themselves. Life really does begin, Jung said, when you have the courage to go into the darkness of your own soul and bring back what you've hidden. That moment, the meeting of your true self, is the moment your life stops being a performance and starts becoming real. But very few people ever reach that moment, not because they're incapable, but because they're too conditioned, too scared, or too comfortable living as someone they're not. We live in a world obsessed with image. How you look, what you earn, how well you fit the mold. Authenticity isn't rewarded. Obedience is. Even spirituality has been packaged, sanitized, turned into hashtags and retreats that rarely confront the shadow, the unconscious, or the raw terror of true self-awareness. Jung's work wasn't meant to make you feel good. It was meant to wake you the hell up. He didn't just ask who you are. He asked who's underneath the mask. What have you buried to survive? What parts of your psyche have you exiled just to be accepted? He knew the cost of becoming your true self is everything false in you, and that cost is high. Finding yourself isn't a feel-good project. It's war between who you were told to be and who you actually are. In this series, we'll walk through the 4 brutal, liberating, and necessary stages of that war. Starting with the first and most invisible enemy, the forces that keep you from ever beginning the journey at all. You were not born lost. You were made that way. From the moment you took your first breath, the world began shaping you into someone manageable, acceptable, useful. You were praised for obedience, rewarded for silence, punished for authenticity. Little by little, you learned what parts of yourself were okay and which ones needed to disappear. You complied to survive, and somewhere in that process, the real you got buried. The cost of belonging was wholeness, and that cost is still being paid every time you pretend to be someone you're not. The first obstacle to finding yourself is social conditioning. Culture teaches you how to think, feel, behave, not for your freedom, but for its convenience. It tells you what success looks like, who you should love, what emotions are acceptable, what dreams are realistic. You didn't just inherit a family name, you inherited a map for how to live. One you never chose. Most people never question it. They follow the script, checking boxes, chasing goals, and wondering why none of it feels like their life. But if you didn't write the script, whose story are you living? The second obstacle is fear. Fear of rejection, judgment, failure, abandonment. The ego clings to the persona because it's terrified of what will happen without it. What if I stop pleasing others and they leave? What if I speak my truth and they laugh? This fear is not childish. It was born in childhood, but it still lives in your nervous system. It keeps you small by making safe choices. But safe choices don't lead to real life. They lead to quiet despair, the kind that builds slowly, invisibly, until one day you realize you're surviving, not living. The third obstacle is emotional repression. Every time you were told, don't cry, don't be angry, calm down, a part of you went underground. You learned to distrust your own feelings. You became a stranger to your inner world. But emotions don't vanish. They hide. Repressed grief turns into numbness. Repressed anger becomes passive aggression. Repressed desire leaks out in self-sabotage. You think you're in control, but your shadow is pulling the strings. Finding yourself means facing the raw, unfiltered truth of how you feel. Not how you should feel, but how you actually do. Another obstacle is the addiction to identity. Most people don't want to find themselves. They want to maintain the self they've been praised for. The achiever, the caretaker, the intellectual, the rebel, these roles become cages. You fear losing them because they've become your value. But Jung warned, any identity you're too attached to is a mask. It doesn't matter how empowered it looks. If it's rigid, it's not you. True identity is fluid. It evolves. And if you're not changing, you're not growing. You're just performing. There's also comfort in conformity. There's a strange safety in being like everyone else, even when it's killing you. You convince yourself you're okay because your life looks fine on paper, but the soul doesn't care about appearances. It wants truth. It wants fire. Conformity is a slow death. It starves your uniqueness, numbs your instincts, silences your intuition. The longer you live in the middle, the harder it is to hear your own voice. And eventually, you forget what it ever sounded like. That's not peace. That's psychological extinction. Family expectations are another invisible chain. You carry ancestral beliefs, inherited fears, unspoken loyalties. Sometimes, the life you're trying to build is being blocked by the family system you're unconsciously protecting. Jung called this the family complex, the emotional inheritance that shapes your path without permission. Breaking from it feels like betrayal, but betraying yourself to stay loyal to a system that silences you isn't love. It's self-abandonment. Healing often means disappointing people. And that's not cruelty, that's maturity. Self-discovery isn't beautiful at first. It's brutal. You don't begin by finding light. You begin by meeting everything you've denied. All the parts of yourself you disown to fit in, stay safe, or be loved. Your rage, your grief, your hunger, your truth. These parts didn't die. They went underground. Now they're waiting for you to stop performing and start listening. Finding yourself is not about building a new identity. It's about unearthing what's been buried alive inside you. The first layer you confront is your persona, the mask you wear to survive. It's the version of you that's likable, presentable, respectable. It gets things done. It makes people comfortable. But it's also a filter, and it keeps you from being fully known. Jung said the persona becomes dangerous when you believe it's your true self. The moment you forget you're wearing a mask is the moment you start living a lie. Self-discovery begins when you realize, this is not me. This is who I became to be accepted. Beneath the mask is the shadow, everything you've rejected in yourself. It's not just the bad stuff. It's also your wildness, your creativity, your sensuality, your intuition. It's the parts that didn't fit the story you were told about who you're allowed to be. Most people never face their shadow. They project it. They see it in others and hate them for it. But the truth is, what you deny in yourself, you will condemn in others. To find yourself, you must stop running, turn toward the darkness, and bring it home. Self-discovery is not a clean process. It's messy and non-linear. You'll feel resistance. You'll want to quit. You'll think, maybe I'm fine the way I am. That's the ego fighting for control. That's the old self clinging to survival. But growth always feels like death at first. You're not dying. Your false self is. Every time you choose truth over comfort, integration over suppression, honesty over image, you're cracking the shell. And inside that shell is someone real, waiting to breathe. One of Jung's most powerful teachings is the union of anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine. No matter your gender, you carry both. But culture teaches us to favor one and reject the other. Men suppress softness. Women suppress power. Rational people ignore emotion. Emotional people distrust logic. Wholeness comes when you stop choosing sides. You allow both energies to coexist, speak, and guide you. The warrior learns to cry. The nurturer learns to fight. That's not contradiction, that's evolution. Inside you live archetypes, ancient energies that shape your inner world. The hero, the orphan, the rebel, the sage. These aren't fantasies. They're psychological realities. You're not just living a life, you're acting out a myth. But if you're unconscious of your role, it controls you. Jung said the goal isn't to destroy these archetypes, but to consciously embody them, to ask, what role am I playing? Is it true? Is it serving my evolution? Until you become aware, you'll keep repeating the same patterns, thinking it's fate when it's just familiarity. Real self-discovery leads to integration, not perfection. You're not here to become flawless, you're here to become whole. That means carrying contradictions. It means being messy, complex, and human. You are both light and dark, selfish and generous, broken and beautiful. Jung didn't ask you to fix yourself. He asked you to include yourself. Wholeness means nothing gets exiled. You stop trying to be good and start trying to be real. And in that rawness, you begin to remember who you've always been. This is where the real journey begins. Not with answers, but with deeper questions. Who am I beneath my conditioning? What have I buried in order to survive? What do I still fear about being fully seen? These questions won't give you comfort, but they will give you back your life. Because the moment you stop lying to yourself is the moment your soul can finally breathe. Self-discovery is not an escape, it's a confrontation. And if you're ready to meet yourself, prepare to be undone and remade. Most people are not afraid of death. They're afraid of ego death, the loss of the identity they've clung to, the image they've crafted, the person they've been pretending to be for so long they forgot it was an act. But Jung made it clear, if you want to become whole, you must let that version of yourself die. Not because it's bad, but because it's incomplete. The ego is not your enemy. It's just small. It was never meant to carry the weight of your entire being. The ego wants clarity, it wants certainty, it wants to be someone. But the deeper truth is, you are not a fixed self. You are a process, a living psyche in constant evolution. Every time you cling to a label, I'm this kind of person, that's just who I am, you shrink your own potential. You trap yourself in repetition. Jung believed the self, the full integrated version of you, is far greater than your conscious identity. The ego is just the door. It's not the house. This illusion of a fixed self is reinforced by culture. From resumes to relationships, we're asked to define ourselves, to pick a lane, to specialize, to brand our personality. But the soul doesn't want branding. It wants expansion. You are not a role. You are not a title. You are not your trauma, your degree, or your past. And the more tightly you hold to any one version of you, the more you resist the evolution your psyche is begging for. Jung spoke of the self as the totality of who you are. Conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, masculine and feminine, wild and wise. The ego is what you know, the self is what you are. And the path to that self often requires a symbolic death. The breakdown of everything you thought you were. This isn't spiritual poetry. It's psychological necessity. The old identity must collapse so the deeper truth can emerge. This is the death that leads to rebirth. But most people resist it. They double down on their persona. They call it just being myself, but it's often just repetition. Growth feels like betrayal to the ego. You feel like you're losing yourself, but you're actually losing what was never truly you. This is why real transformation feels like crisis. You no longer fit into the old skin, but the new one hasn't fully formed. You're in between stories. And that in-between is sacred. It's where the soul does its deepest work. The self isn't discovered through force, it emerges through surrender. You stop trying to control the process. You allow space for mystery, silence, and discomfort. You follow what Jung called the individuation process, the lifelong unfolding of who you really are beneath the noise. This isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming real, becoming intimate with your contradictions, becoming flexible, fluid, human. Your job is not to sculpt a flawless identity. It's to shed what no longer fits. The biggest illusion is that you are one thing. You are not. You are multitudes. You are capable of transformation at any moment. You're allowed to outgrow your old self. You're allowed to contradict your past. You're allowed to change your mind, shift your values, burn down the old life and start again. The ego says, stay consistent. The soul says, stay true. And staying true often requires radical reinvention. When you let go of the fixed self, you open the door to something terrifying and beautiful. Freedom. Freedom to grow, to change, to feel, to fail, to rise, to begin again. Jung didn't want you to perfect your mask. He wanted you to outgrow it, to peel it off, layer by layer, until what remains is not a concept, but a living, breathing soul. The goal isn't to become someone. It's to remember you've always been more than any label could contain. There is no final version of you, no point where you arrive, fully awakened, perfectly healed, never triggered, always certain. That fantasy is just another ego trap, a spiritualized version of perfectionism. Jung was clear, individuation is not a destination. It's a lifelong unfolding, a cycle of breaking, remembering, integrating, and evolving. Every time you think you've figured yourself out, life will hand you something new, something that forces you deeper, something that makes you question it all again. Authenticity is not a personality trait. It's a rebellion. Every day the world will ask you to conform, to edit yourself, to make others comfortable. Authenticity means refusing. It means choosing discomfort over approval. It means saying no when silence is easier. It means letting go of people who only love the mask. Being real costs you. Friends, family, opportunities, illusions. But the price of not being real is even higher. Your vitality, your integrity, your life. There will be days you feel fake again, days you catch yourself slipping back into performance. That doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're human. The mask is seductive. The world rewards it. But every time you choose honesty, even in small ways, you reclaim a piece of yourself. Authenticity isn't about being loud or rebellious. It's about being honest. Honest about your needs, your pain, your joy, your desires, and honest about when you don't know who you are, because even that is truth. Wholeness is not a static state. It's a dynamic relationship with your inner world. Some days, your shadow will speak louder. Some days, your inner child will need care. Some days, the old persona will try to take over again. That's not regression, it's rhythm. The psyche moves in spirals, not straight lines. What matters is your willingness to stay in relationship with yourself, to stay curious, to stay open, to stay present, even when it's uncomfortable. You're not here to be consistent, you're here to be true. And truth shifts. What was authentic for you last year might not be anymore. That's not inauthenticity, that's growth. You're allowed to evolve, to shed beliefs, to change your voice, to expand your identity. This is why the real work is never finished. Because you are not finished. You are still becoming, still unraveling, still returning to the truth beneath all the noise. Sometimes authenticity looks like chaos, like walking away from everything you built, like saying, I was wrong, like disappointing everyone who thought they knew you. And that's okay. Real life Your life won't always be neat, but it will be yours. That's what Jung meant by individuation, the courage to live a life that's yours, even if no one claps for it, even if it doesn't make sense to anyone else, even if it breaks every rule you were taught. Don't romanticize the journey. There is grief in it, real grief, for the years you spent pretending, for the self you never got to be, for the connections that were built on your silence. But in that grief, there is also liberation, because once you've lost everything false, you're finally free to build something true, something rooted, something alive. The grief is part of the birth. Let it come. Let it clean you out. Let it clear the space for what's real. You weren't born to wear a mask. You were born to embody your own shape. Somewhere along the way, you learned to bend, to fit demands, to stay small, to trade clarity for comfort. You built a self that others could accept, but in doing so, the real you slipped behind walls. Carl Jung didn't offer easy answers. He asked you to wake, to allow the old structures to break, to let the persona crack, to step into the uncertainty beneath identity. The cost is high: loss, confusion, grief. But on the other side is freedom. Not the freedom of escapism, but the freedom of presence. The freedom to live from your center. To live authentically is to risk, to confront what wants to stay hidden, to choose honesty in moments when silence seems safer, to shift when change knocks, to abandon what no longer belongs. Every choice like this is small revolution, quiet, subtle, fierce. You may never fully arrive, and that's fine. Arrival is an illusion. What matters is that each day you ask, am I owning this? Is this mine? Is this shifting? Even when there's uncertainty, even when fear rises, these questions guide you back. You will lose parts. You will outgrow identities. You'll surprise yourself with new desires, perspectives, values. You will change. And that's not betrayal. That's awakening. You are allowed to evolve. You're allowed to shift. You're allowed to become someone you never saw coming. The world rewards your mask, but your soul rewards your honesty. When you stop performing, even in small places, you open space for presence, depth, creativity, connection. That is the turning point. That is the gateway to a life that's yours. The quiet revolution begins when you stop pretending to be someone else. When you step into your shadow, your contradictions, your edges. When you begin to trust your inner pulse. When you reclaim what you exiled. And when you do, even if you tremble, you begin to live. Not to survive. Not to please, but to become.